3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our NFL preview for Awesemo.com. We are going to be talking about the quarterbacks today. If you missed part 1, go check it out. We discussed everything you need to know from a team level, all the coaching changes, all the MVP odds, all of the Vegas win totals, all that stuff. Today, we're going to be delving deeper on quarterbacks, talking again about MVP odds, some of which have changed quite a bit in just a week. We're also going to be talking about a lot of little statistical things as we go, and of course, a little personal bias, because what would a stream be with Josh and myself without that? I'm Chris Spags, joined by my good friend, back from a little refreshing vacation, Mr. Josh Engelman. Josh, how are you?
I'm pretty good. It seems weird to talk about a vacation after I just took a prior vacation, but just so happened to be, that's how the schedule wound out. You know, they just happen to be bookending each other. So no more travel for quite a while on my end. It's good to be back, and I'm excited. I get 2 sports in one day. I talked a ton of baseball today already. Going to talk more for the live stream tonight. Not that that's going to matter for everyone else that's listening to this. But yeah, I get MLB and NFL today. I love it.
Yeah, we're doing everything today, and we're getting closer and closer to the NFL's launch period. So obviously, we're going to be getting more granular as we go. But we are talking quarterbacks today, as I mentioned. Same thing as last time. We're going to go in alphabetical order. I'm going to take you through the kind of basics you need to know. And then Josh and I will throw it back and forth and discuss and figure out which guys we love and which guys we hate, because that's what people want. Disagreement. We want to yell at each other and strangle each other over the computer like people on ESPN do. So let's get into it. Starting off with the Arizona Cardinals. Expected starter this year, Sam Bradford, who is currently a plus 12,500 chance to win MVP. Not great. His expected backups this year, Mike Glennon and the rookie Josh Rosen coming on board from UCLA. As I mentioned in the last video, there's going to be a lot of, not a lot of repeat, but some repeat with the stuff we talked about last time. The Cardinals completely shifted things over from Bruce Arians to new coach, more defensive-minded guy, and Steve Wilks from Carolina. They're bringing on board Mike McCoy, who was pretty terrible in Denver last year, was fired in November after leading Denver to a 26th ranked 5.9 yards per pass attempt. The Cardinals did a bad job keeping Carson Palmer mostly clean last year. They were 25th ranked in terms of quarterback protection, allowing sacks on 8% of their passing attempts. So that is not good news for Mr. Sam Bradford and his very delicate little body. Long MVP odds, a questionable offensive coordinator, a fragile quarterback who's getting paid $15 million guaranteed. Not great. One positive, David Johnson will be back, full health. Obviously, he's a great safety valve play, as well as a route runner who can get deep and in the flats. I wrote this, and I feel it even more now as I've said this out loud. I do not like Sam Bradford as a draft pick, as a DFS play, maybe depending upon the schedule and all that. I would much rather have a Josh Rosen later in the year on waivers when, whatever quarterback I have gets hurt. Not crazy about the Cardinals, not crazy about Sam Bradford's MVP odds. How do you feel, Josh?
Of all players to throw at least 10 attempts last year, Sam Bradford, highest adjusted net yards per attempt. Only had 43 attempts. So I'm cherry picking straight off the bat. I just thought it was interesting.
That's a good stat. Heavy stats to lead off with. I like it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just that he happened to be first, and I knew we were going to talk about him first. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have even brought it up. For me, Bradford is a guy that I would pick up during bye weeks. Same for Rosen if he ends up in, or Glennon. There's not a lot to like from a passing perspective for Arizona. Look, I love Larry Fitzgerald. He's had an incredible career. He's not like 8 years ago, Larry Fitzgerald. They don't have the weapons. And I can't see anybody under center for them as anything more than like a streaming option. Unless you've got a 2-quarterback league or something.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sam Bradford's kind of a middling play. It's possible the offense does more than I would hope, but I would assume losing Bruce Arians is not going to be a positive. Defensive-minded coaches tend to like to run the ball a little more, try to be a little more smash mouth. So I would be more inclined to look at David Johnson. We'll obviously talk more about him in the coming weeks. But yeah, not crazy about quarterback. Atlanta Falcons bringing back Matt Ryan, who is plus 2,200 to win MVP. Expected backup is Matt Schaub, the ageless Matt Schaub. Matt Ryan last year was averaging 6th best in the league, 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Some concern, and this is more a narrative one, Julio Jones not getting a raise on his current deal. Unclear if he's going to be in camp on time. He does have 3 years left in his contract, so it's not a crazy thing. But pissing off your star receiver in a year in which the other receivers are Mohamed Sanu and Calvin Ridley, who we discussed a little last week, but not an elite athlete, an interesting first-round pick, but not an elite athlete. No Taylor Gabriel. Matt Ryan to me seems stable, but this Julio Jones news doesn't make me feel great about it. He's in camp on time, sure, but a little less bullish on Matt Ryan than I was last week.
There's going to be a lot of noise in the background right now, and I apologize. That will go away shortly. Matt Ryan, 12th in adjusted net yards per attempt last year, if we include Garoppolo's 5 games at least. I love Matt Ryan. I love his weapons. I see no reason he shouldn't be a quality quarterback option this year, as per usual. I see very little downside to having Matt Ryan. That said, I wouldn't target him early, but I would expect him to be, relatively popular throughout each week at DFS. He's just kind of there. He's met. You know what you're going to get here. If he's on the field and Julio Jones is on the field, that's a dynamic combo every single week.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more of a thing where I don't like discord in my off seasons. I mean, obviously it's an imperfect league. There's a lot of guys with various issues, much more serious some than Julio Jones's contract issues are. But it worries me a little bit when he is the main weapon, and I don't know how much confidence I have in the secondary receiver weapons. So it's just something to watch. I think for me, I would have, if I were a stock guy, I would say hold Matt Ryan. Don't, he's not a buy, he's not a sell. Just kind of stick with him. But
I think that's a great way to put it.
There we go. Hey, look at us landing on salient points.
I don't like it. I'm gonna take a stance on Matt Ryan one way or the other now, just to get off of that us being agreeable island.
It's hard for us to do it, but sometimes it does happen. Matt Ryan, congratulations. Matty Ice, you've accomplished that. Also, one thing to note too, a little consistency for the Falcons getting Steve Sarkisian again. He's not a great coordinator, but consistency does help. And again, like Josh mentioned, he's a stable guy. So I think that's the appeal for Matt Ryan. He's the boyfriend you're not in love with. I think that would be another analogy, which got a little gay.
Sarkisian might try to drink him. You might think he's a beer accidentally. Matty Ice?
I would drink him up in a heartbeat. That's a Matty Ice sounds delicious and refreshing.
Oh, it sounds like it would cost $7.50 a 24-pack.
Baltimore Ravens. Expected start this year, Joe Flacco, currently a plus 10,000 shot to win MVP. His expected backups entering the year, Lamar Jackson, the rookie, former Heisman winner, and Mr. Robert Griffin III, Josh's guy who he's hoping to break through. This to me reads like a make or break year for Joe Flacco. He is still owed $24 million guaranteed in 2019 and 2020, so they probably won't be able to cut ties with him. But he was really bad last year. They averaged a league worst 5.3 yards per pass attempt. They returned the same offensive coordinator with Marty Mornhinweg. They did revamp the wide receiving core, as we mentioned last week. Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, and John Brown joining the team. Mike Wallace, Michael Campanaro, and Jeremy Maclin also all gone. So it's a complete turnover there. They're obviously putting the blame elsewhere than Mr. Joe Flacco. The Ravens are going to use Lamar Jackson in some packages, apparently as a passer and a runner. So there is a little bit of a risk in Flacco. The thing to me, and one thing that jumps out, I feel like this reminds me a lot of the Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees thing, where they draft Rivers and then Brees has his best year ever, just because you feel the guy breathing down your neck. And I think that's the one thing I would say is going in Joe Flacco's favor. If he's playing for his job this year, I think officially, and there is a legitimate guy behind him who people will want to see play, especially if things turn south towards the end of the year, I would still be more inclined to go with a Lamar Jackson later in the year when Flacco, I presume, finds the bench or gets hurt or something. But Flacco would have a little interest to me in that respect. Just, maybe there's a shot he does something. But I'm not crazy about the situation at all to start the year.
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I'm with you. He ranked 40th in the same stat I've been saying. Saying adjusted net yards per attempt over and over again is going to get old. So just assume that's what I mean when I say that. He wasn't good last year. I don't think that he's going to be any good this year. I don't particularly see him as fantasy relevant. I don't really see Lamar Jackson as fantasy relevant. These are the guys that you'll take in week 7 when 6 teams are on a bye. Other than that, they're not interesting guys to have. I can't imagine somebody being like, I really expect a big year out of Joe Flacco. It's just like there were how many guys? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Like I'm already at 15 of guys that started 15 games last year that are all ahead of him. I'll fully pass. They should just turn the job over at this point. What's the downside?
Just the money invested, I guess, and the hope that he could maybe do what he did once before. But no, I'm with you on it. I think the reason I would take him is if you're in like a 16 team league and you're trying to get cute and you don't want to spend up a quarterback in auction, you take Flacco for $1 because there's nobody else left at that point. Sure, like if everybody took the backups and the guys, then I would go Flacco. But I think for me, I'm with you on it mostly. Flacco, not a great play, and if you are playing him, you're playing a narrative thing in the hopes that he turns it around. And obviously, we are a data-driven site, the 538 at DFS, so we don't have that viewpoint necessarily.
He's like he's 33 years old. What's the dream scenario here? That he just becomes really good at 34?
I guess, or it's that he's more consistent in line with the stuff that he's shown positively in the past. But you're right. I mean, when you show 90% of your career as being that guy, and then you have 10%, which is one tremendous Super Bowl run, which one are you? Which one are you really? You're the 90% guy, or not the 10% guy. Weighted
average years last year, based on the amount of attempts that were thrown to see like age of quarterback, 29.4 would be league average. So Flacco is essentially 4 years above the league average quarterback in the NFL. And he ranked somewhere in the late 20s in adjusted net yards per attempt. What are we waiting for? Tear him out of there. Sure. There's no need for him any longer. It's just money. No, you can't unsign that contract. I hate Flacco. Sorry.
He is a guy who is like, I think, a sign of the NFL and its biggest flaw, which is just inertia. A lot of teams keep the coach. A lot of people rehire the same coordinators. Talked a little bit about that last week. Don't do a lot, but have one thing they can try to claim, and then you find out, oh yeah, they're actually not that good. And I think Flacco fits that criteria where you just keep the job because you have the job more than, and you were paid handsomely for the job, but you might not be that good at it. So I think we're agreed there. Flacco, not great. Maybe mild future interest in Lamar Jackson would be my professional recommendation. Onto the Buffalo Bills. Expected starter, A.J. McCarron. Currently, he has non-available odds to win MVP, so that's not great. Expected backup, first-rounder Josh Allen. Also, no MVP odds. It may surprise you to learn. So the Bills, not great there. They do bring on board Brian DeBall from Alabama as their new offensive coordinator. It's primarily been a tight end specialist in the NFL. So not something super motivational there for a quarterback or a coach rather who's going to have to mold some young quarterbacks. Buffalo was 28th last year in yards per pass attempt, averaged just 5.7 yards per. The wide receiving group and running back group did nothing to help out either. 31st in yards after the catch. So they're not catching the ball. They're not catching the ball at depth, and they're not running the ball afterwards at any depth. They also allowed sacks on 8.7% of their pass attempts, which would put them at 30th in the league. This all spells to me serious fucking problems for the Bills. They were very lucky last year. They are not going to be as lucky this year. And they also have LaShawn McCoy's issue still hanging over their heads. We don't know how that's going to turn out. Hard pass on everything Bills related for me this year.
Yeah. Former Bills quarterback Tyrod Taylor was just under league average last year. Quite far ahead of Joe Flacco. Yet he's gone, and they brought in a bunch of slop. So pass on McCarron. Just give it to Josh Allen and hope for the... Well, I mean, I kind of. If LaShawn McCoy is on the field, I would want to work Allen in sooner rather than later. If he's not, I probably wouldn't want to roll Allen out there with the Chris Ivory, Kelvin Benjamin, Zay Jones type nonsense. So let McCarron take the beating in that regard. But they're not going anywhere with McCarron and Josh Allen.
I'm okay seeing what McCarron can do. Like, I think he's young enough where it's worth a shot to see if he can win the job, and maybe a little motivation coming in with his new deal. He got a new deal, I think. Whatever, with his new situation, at least, if nothing else, and with a first-round pick behind him, who's also not particularly great. Maybe McCarron has something. There has been enough kind of people who are know better and who are scouts and stuff who think he has some potential. But yeah, I think that's a stay away from me overall. Even the best age of McCarron is just going to be a game manager, I would think.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that someone can be that good, be in the league for 4 years, have 133 pass attempts.
Andy
Like,
Dalton holding that seat down.
yeah, apparently. I have no high hopes for AJ McCarron. That would be a very interesting career path.
Yep. All right. I'm with you on it. Yeah, I think stay away would be our recommendation. Carolina Panthers expected starter Cam Newton, who is currently plus 2,000 to win MVP. His expected backups, Derek Anderson, gone. We are now down to Garrett Gilbert and Taylor Heineke. Panthers are hoping to get Cam Newton to another level. New offensive coordinator Norv Turner and his son Scott coming in as a QB coach. The hope is that he can do the things that he did with the Minnesota offense. Obviously, he was not on that staff last year, but they ran very similar offensive patterns to what he developed, and then Pat Shurmur iterated on and took to the next level. So the hope is that Turner still has enough QB whisperer in him to get Newton to the next level. They did add Torrey Smith, C.J. Anderson, and first-rounder DJ Moore, who should be offensive assets, at least on paper. They also probably have one of the worst number one receivers in the league in Devin Funchess, I guess, depending upon how you view him. I think he's a number 2 guy at best. That's me. I think Christian McCaffrey is in a good spot this year. Obviously, he will help out a lot with Newton's both his catch rate and his ability to get yards after the catch. I think I'm very good with Cam Newton. He ran for the most touchdowns in the league last year, tied for Dak Prescott with 6. Obviously, that's a big asset. Turner's never had a guy who ran, so I would worry a little about him trying to keep him in the pocket. But I think at this point, the Panthers know that's not the right move. So I would hope Turner would adjust. I think Turner can get Cam into good spots. I think Cam's a good quarterback. Obviously, the running stuff, I think he ran for almost 800 yards last year. All great. I'm pretty comfortable with Cam, and I think he's going to get drafted pretty lowly in season-long leagues and probably be cheap enough in DFS to be playable right away. So Cam looks really good to me.
Yeah, he had a bit of a rough year last year, a little bit below average. And some of that could be Greg Olsen just not being healthy. He only played 7 games. I expect some growth from McCaffrey. And obviously, this is adjusted net yards per attempt is just measuring the passing game. So, Cam, a bit more lethal of a runner than most quarterbacks that are going to be playing. So that's shorting him a little bit. I'd be willing to call him average last year, which is, not the best for Carolina. They're going to need more than average Cam Newton to be a threat. If Cam can be, a top 10 quarterback, I think we start talking about something real here. I see that. Like, I think that's a completely feasible spot for him to be, but I'm becoming a little bit more pessimistic that he doesn't have the weapons that he's going to need. A lot will, DJ Moore is going to tell a big story, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I didn't check out DJ Moore's Spark comparison, but let's learn that real fast, because I think DJ Moore is one guy who I didn't account for enough in the first preview we did. And if he is somebody who can take some heat off of Funchess, I think we've discussed Funchess not necessarily the most impressive player in the world. He's done okay given the opportunity he had. But yeah, let's see, DJ Moore's comp. DJ Moore's comp is Pierre Garçon, which is not bad. He does have some pretty good burst. It's the 94th percentile for burst, some good straight line speed as well with a 4.40. A Garçon comp is not bad, and they do need a sort of big-bodied guy who can get downfield. I want to believe in Cam. I do want to believe in Cam, and I think if he doesn't get better this year, I think he's another Flacco guy where are you just ever going to get your full potential? He's been an MVP, so I don't want to undercut him too much, but that would be my question.
I think he has a much higher ceiling than anything Flacco could ever do just because of his legs. Just a much different runner. Although, how long can he keep that up and continue to take the beating? I'm becoming less and less interested in Cam Newton this year.
That's fair. On to the Chicago Bears. Their expected starter, Mitch Trubisky, coming in, who is plus 8,000 now to win MVP. Expected backup is Chase Daniel, the much ballyhooed guy who cannot win a starting job anywhere in the NFL. They bring a new head coach in Matt Nagy, also new coordinator Mark Helfrich, fresh out of flaming out at Oregon, but in theory bringing some of those run-pass options / West Coast offense philosophies to Chicago. Trubisky is already talking a big game. He just had an article come out within the last week in which he discussed how he wants to make people eat his words and thinks that the Bears can compete in the NFC North this year. The odds would say that Mitch Trubisky has about a 1.2% chance based on implied probability with the Vegas odds to win MVP. So, not terrible considering he's Mitch Trubisky, I would say, to have a 1 in 100 shot for him to be the MVP. Not crazy. There's more weapons for Trubisky. They have Allen Robinson now, Taylor Gabriel from the Falcons, Trey Burton from the Super Bowl winning Eagles. I do think that it's hard to see them not improving a little. I don't think Trubisky is a guy you want to bank on as being a fantasy starter right away. But I said it last week. I'll say it again. I think this offense can be productive this year. One thing they do need to watch out for, they were 23rd ranked last year in allowing sacks, giving up about 7.6% sacks on dropbacks. So not great. Trubisky needs to get faster, decide faster, make better decisions overall. I kind of have a little hope, though. I don't mind Trubisky. I don't mind him as being a late round flyer in your leagues, or a DFS play depending on his matchups.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass 100% on Trubisky.
Damn it!
He was not very good last year. I don't see anything about the Bears that makes me think that he has a reason to be good this year. I'm happy to be proven wrong, I guess. But I don't see it. I don't see a path to the Bears being an offense that is just led by Mitch Trubisky. I just don't see it. They're just not good. They're just not good.
I like the weapons, and I like the fact that I don't know, if they're going to make it easy on him and give him short West Coast passes, hit guys in the flat, they have the weapons to do it. They have Tariq Glenn. They have all these or Cohen rather. They have all these guys who are just good in space. And I think to me, that's what strikes me as interesting, is that he just has to get these guys the ball 4 yards out and they can do some things. And he just has to throw it up for Allen Robinson, who's going to cover up, as long as he's healthy, going to cover up a lot of his warts in terms of hitting throwing windows, because Robinson's a jump ball getter. I think they made it about as good on him as they can, and now it's up to him to take the leap. And I think he's okay enough to do it.
I mean, if the goal is to just get somebody the ball 4 yards from the line of scrimmage, I'm good enough to do that. And he went 4-8 last year, so
you want to compete for the job with Chase Daniel.
59% completion rating. If we're even just trying to get him to dump that shit off, he's in trouble. I'm hard sell on Mitch Trubisky.
All right, I can see it. We're gonna agree to disagree on this one. We'll all come back and we'll remember when Mitch Trubisky is the MVP and that 1% chance pays off. Put your bets in on Mitch Trubisky now to win MVP. That's the move. Cincinnati Bengals expected starter, the ginger rifle, I don't know, the red rifle, whatever they call him. Either way, the soulless ginger Andy Dalton back again, plus 15,000 to win MVP. His expected backup, USC alum Matt Barkley, who's shown flashes but is actually perfectly suited to be a backup, but should not be getting starting reps. Offensive coordinator Bill Lazor will get his first full training camp after replacing Ken Zampese last year. It's not looking great for Andy Dalton despite all the continuity. One thing I should point out, which to me, you can read the data either way. Cincinnati was 4th in yards per pass attempt in 2015, 13th in yards per pass attempt in 2016, 22nd in yards per pass attempt in 2017. So, are they due for regression closer to the sort of 4th through 13th range, which would make them, pretty viable from a fantasy perspective? Or is it just a sign that they're turning out Marvin Lewis and there's kind of nothing left to do there? They have the weapons. They have guys who can catch the ball. They have A.J. Green. They have Eifert. They have LaFell. They have good running backs and Bernard and Mixon who do diverse things. There's no reason that Dalton should have odds this low and should be this offense be getting this bad. I want to believe they can turn it around, but what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I'm actually a little pro Dalton. Now this is a spot where I actually do think he has real weapons, unlike all of those trash receivers and such you mentioned for the Bears. AJ Green is a legit threat. I'm anxious to see what John Ross can do healthy. Tyler Eifert had 5 targets last year, 4 catches. Just having him, if he can be healthy, which is not something that he does terribly often. Wasn't really healthy the year before, but he's good. He's really good when he's on the field. I think that matters. I think having another full season of Joe Mixon matters. I would be buying Andy Dalton for this particular year. I'm hoping that they're just atrocious. Marvin Lewis can just leave finally, make the Bengals a little bit more interesting. But if I had to do something, if Andy Dalton was a stock for 2018, I'd buy it.
The odds are pretty good. I mean, if you're a sports bettor, the odds are pretty good. Plus 15,000 for Andy Dalton, given the numbers he's put up in the past, seems like a pretty good value to me. I mean, it's sort of all relative because I don't know that I would actually see Andy Dalton winning the MVP, but on just a pure value perspective, there's something there. Sure, his ADP, his average draft position probably matches up as well. So I'm with you. I think there's some value on Andy Dalton. I think I don't blame you if you're assuming that Cincinnati's just going to keep tuning out and not doing well until they change the coach. So I think that's also a viewpoint. So maybe a volatile option, but I think some real upside. So I'm with you on it. Cleveland Browns, expected starter this year, Tyrod Taylor, who is plus 12,500 to win MVP, better than Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton actually is going to be the lowest ranked quarterback in terms of odds to win MVP that we will come across besides the unranked guys. So something worth noting there as well. But Tyrod Taylor plus 12,500. His expected backups, Baker Mayfield and Drew Stanton. Browns, as we discussed last week, added Taylor, Carlos Hyde, Darren Fells, and Jarvis Landry, as well as Baker Mayfield, obviously, and Nick Chubb. They also should be having full seasons of Josh Gordon and Corey Coleman. That's a pretty well-stocked cupboard. Cleveland, I think you could pretty much throw a lot of their stats out the window. But they were really terrible last year. They were dead last in interceptions per pass attempt. Not surprising given the poo-poo platter of poo-poo that they put out there in 2017. They were also second to last in yards per pass attempt. It could be a structure of the offense, could be a structure of the team. I would still expect Tyrod Taylor to get them at least up a little bit on that, even in this worst possible case scenario. I think there's value to extract from Cleveland. I think a lot of people are going to be afraid to go to them just given the fact that they're Cleveland and they've shown such a terrible track record over the years. But there are proven weapons here, and the pieces have to come together somewhat. I'm okay with Tyrod. I probably wouldn't draft him and lock my whole roster around him in a season-long league, but not bad to me. It doesn't look bad.
I mean, he's a placeholder, as he should be in any fantasy scenario. You're not going to be like, Tyrod Taylor's going to be the key to my victory. Nor are the Browns. Again, he's streamable in the right matchup, but this is not an offense that we're targeting to be some sort of offensive juggernaut. Juggernaut? I'm the juggernaut. Anyway.
I'm the juggernaut, bitch.
Yeah, it's been a while. That's an old school. That's like the original meme.
There was a throwback to it in Deadpool. Oh, wait, nope. Can't spoil that. No, whatever.
Seems like you just did. Seems like you just did. I assume
it's been out for 4 months, whatever. If you're an actual comic book fan, you saw it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I will, and it's not going to change anything. That's not the kind of movie I'm watching for spoilers. I'm watching it for the comedy. Anyway, not important. Look, I like Tyrod Taylor. I think he's way more functional than people give him credit for. The problem is it doesn't matter from a fantasy perspective. This is not that team. The amount of things that would need to go right for them to even be like fantasy viable is a lot. So I'm good. Whether it's Taylor or Mayfield at some point in time, they're not guys that are ever going to be like super owned by me.
Okay. I think I view them more from a DFS perspective. I think there might be some value there, especially those first couple weeks, because, you do have Landry who catches a lot of balls. He's been a PPR monster. You do have, somebody has to give him the ball, and that's going to be likely going to be Tyrod Taylor. And, a little bit of legs, a little bit of improvisation skills. I don't mind. I think there's going to be some value from a DFS perspective in the beginning of the year. But I agree, for a season-long standpoint, there's not going to be enough to be worthwhile. But, we always talk about game theory and contrarian stuff. I think the Browns are still going to be very contrarian despite being a much different Browns team.
I'll save those thoughts for the wide receiver version of this. Also, we're running way long.
We are doing it again. I'll speed it up. But is it weird now if I speed it up and we just spend all this time on these asshole teams?
I think what we need to do is chop this one at the midway point again, but this time do it for real.
Let's speed up. Let's see how I can do. Dallas Cowboys expected starter Dak Prescott, who's plus 3,500 to win MVP. Expected backup is Cooper Rush this year. Big losses with Des Bryant and Jason Witten. They are bringing in Allen Hurns, Deontay Thompson, Tavon Austin, rookies Michael Gallup, and Dalton Schultz at tight end. Dak Prescott backslid quite a bit in his sophomore effort last year, falling from a 5th best 7.5 yards per pass attempt in 2016 to 17th ranked 6.4 yards per pass attempt in 2017. Turned the ball over quite a bit as well. Threw interceptions on 2.6% of his pass attempts, which would put him at 24th in the league. For me, it's hard to say whether that's a symptom of Ezekiel Elliott, the uncertainty there from a game planning and practice standpoint. That's also not great. I think Dak can turn it around. The offensive line needs to get a little better as well. They were kind of middle of the pack last year, and if that's a strength point which you're paying all your money to, needs to be better. Dak did run for the most touchdowns in the league, as I mentioned before, tied with Cam Newton, so that's interesting. I think Dak can turn it around. I don't know that I love the weapons, but I feel like if you have weapons that are kind of mediocre, and that means that Dak probably has to spread the ball around a little more. I think he's a pretty good mid-tier QB, not a top 10 guy, but a guy who should have some upside, especially in running, in leagues where if you were, rewarded more for running QB. I don't know if they exist, but they should.
Yeah, I'm not buying Dak here. He was fine as a quarterback last year. I don't see a ton of upside from a fantasy perspective. He doesn't appear to be drafted as if that's going to happen. And that's a lot of new weapons to work in. No Witten, tons of new wideouts. I see growing pains here more than anything else. I think he'll end up having like a fine statistical season for the Cowboys. I just don't know how viable he'll be from a fantasy perspective. Very matchup dependent for this year.
I'm with it. I think that he's kind of a middle of the pack guy, and I think those are the guys where there's a little bit of flexibility and where you're viewing them, and I think it's going to depend week to week for him as well. Denver Broncos expected starter Case Keenum, who is currently a plus 6,000 bet to win MVP. His expected backup, the very, very not good Paxton Lynch. New offensive coordinator in town is Bill Musgrave, who was the interim last year for a month after taking over for the fired Mike McCoy. In his last full-time stint as offensive coordinator, he led the Raiders to a middling 19th ranked yards per pass attempt, slightly better 11th ranked rushing attack. It's not a guy who I would qualify as an elite offensive mind, so I think that's something worth noting. One also thing worth noting for Case Keenum, he was the second most accurate quarterback in the NFL last year, 67.7% accuracy rate, which was just behind Drew Brees. And that's a big leap forward from Trevor Siemian last year's, who had 59% completion rate. Pretty terrible. They still have some good weapons. Keenum has shown flashes. They have a rookie in Royce Freeman who will be joining Devontae Booker, who should make that part of the attack a little better. I don't love Case Keenum. I am not crazy about him. I think he will be a fairly competent flyer, though, one of those guys who can fill in for you. What do you think about Case?
Do I think he's going to have last year's season again? No, I think that's more of an outlier than anything else. But he was really good last year. And even falling back to like league average still puts him in a spot that's significantly ahead of a lot of other guys we've already talked about. If Demaryius Thomas can recover and have like the season that people wanted him to have last year, like Keenum could be okay, but I mean, he's going to a worse team than he played for last year, and I think he'll probably pay for that. I can't imagine him being anywhere near last year, but I think that he can still be an average starter.
Yeah, I mean, Denver, I think we talked about a little last time in part one. I think the Denver defense is going to rebound a little. They weren't as bad as people made them out to be last year. It seems to me like with both Musgrave and just Keenum and the sort of way this offense is shaking out with the moves they've made, it seems like they're going to try to have a more balanced attack rather than try to sling it as much as Minnesota did last year. So I think Keenum's an okay play, but not one with a particularly high fantasy upside. Just a guy. He's just a guy who's pretty good and probably won't be as good as he was in 2017.
Yeah, I would say his fantasy upside is relatively limited this year compared to like them just being okay.
Yep, I'm with you on it. Detroit Lions expected starter is Matt Stafford, currently a plus 3,300 bet to win MVP. His expected backup is Matt Castle. The offense is returning most of the key components, including their coordinator, Jim Bob Cooter, who they did retain despite a new head coach. They are replacing Eric Ebron with Luke Wilson and Levine Tololo. They are going to bring in LeGarrette Blount and Kerryon Johnson to join an already very crowded backfield with Theo Riddick and Amir Abdullah. Detroit was 7th in the league in yards per pass attempt last year. Matt Stafford also limited his mistakes much more than you would think of a Matt Stafford, throwing interceptions at a 9th best 1.93% rate of interception per pass attempt. He got hit a little too much last year. 7.6% of his dropbacks he got sacked, which would put him at 24th in the NFL for the Lions. They need to shore that up. To me, though, I think the days of Stafford as the gunslinging fantasy quarterback of yore, at least on a week-to-week basis, are over. I think a better version of Matt Stafford comes closer to a game manager where he's just not going to be that fantasy guy. And I think the MVP odds are sort of in line with that. He's not a guy who's like, stat padding Matt like he was a couple years ago, / belly padding Matt occasionally. But I think he's going to be a good real life quarterback. For fantasy, though, I think I'd rather go to guys who are going to have a more wide open offense.
So Stafford fits what I like to do when I play season long. I would probably have him and some other guy in his range. He actually had the same adjusted net yards per attempt as Case Keenum last year. Stafford was really good. 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 4,500 yards. I don't have any problem with running back Stafford. You want to play him in the good matchups. I like to have two decent quarterbacks and play the one that has the better matchup each week. And I would be happy to do that. Stafford would be the type of guy that I would probably start like 6, 7, 8 times in a season-long league.
Yeah, I think it's a platoon thing that makes sense. I just don't view him as that guy from a couple years ago where he would single-handedly, sway games and put up, 40 fantasy point games. I don't think he's there anymore, and I don't think they want him to be there, especially, with Matt Patricia coming in. Again, defensive-minded coaches tend to like to a ball control offense a little more. So to me, I think that's where Stafford is. I'm with you. I think he's just like a platoon guy with some upside.
Perfect way to describe him.
All right. Green Bay Packers. We got Aaron Rodgers back, currently the favorite to win MVP with a plus 550 chance to win it. He's expected backups, Brett Hundley and Deshaun Kaiser competing for the role. As we mentioned last week, former Packers offensive coordinator Joe Philbin returns. It's a spot where he guided Aaron Rodgers last to an NFL best 8.7 yards per pass attempt in 2011. Obviously a different NFL, but still a very noteworthy stat. Rodgers is getting two of the best red zone threats he's ever had with new tight ends Jimmy Graham and Mercedes Lewis. Jordy Nelson's gone, obviously a Rodgers favorite, but he also looked pretty washed up last year. I don't think that's a play that's going to hurt him. If anything, I think it's going to help him to have to push the ball towards Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, Geronimo Thompson, whoever they have in that, or Geronimo Allison, rather, whoever they have in that sort of spot, I think is going to be much better off than Jordy Nelson would have been this year. Rodgers MVP odds would imply that he has about a 16% probability of winning the award this year. So that's as high as it gets, and also just not a bad crapshoot to make. Backup situation's dire, so obviously Rodgers or bust for them. But I very much like Rodgers, and I think any price you could pay for him in an auction, I think any sort of matchup-based play from DFS you're going to have with him, I think he looks great for everything.
So my head tells me it's Aaron Rodgers. Just go to Aaron Rodgers. He was not great last year before he was hurt. Relatively pedestrian numbers for Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't necessarily say that their weapons have gotten any better. But he is the consensus number one quarterback off the board. He's ranking number one in ADP across the board for me in everything that I'm looking at. I wouldn't want to take him as my first quarterback. I don't see as much upside in taking Aaron Rodgers. So while I like him, and I think he's the heartbeat of this team, and I would expect that if he's on the field, the Packers are a playoff team, I don't see him as like the most interesting fantasy quarterback this year. I might be really, really off base there.
I just think, I think obviously with my view on it, I would assume I'm buying more into the Joe Philbin thing and the fact that, they're trying to get the team back together. I also do believe that Jimmy Graham and Lewis are substantial upgrades on what Richard Rodgers and Jared Cook from last year. I think to me, I agree that there's a little too much heat on the Packers, and that does freak me out a little bit. But boy, I do like the weapons, and I just like getting rid of Jordy Nelson too with how he looked last year. I think his reliance on him was a big part of why he struggled earlier in the year, and Jordy just couldn't get the separation that he had before. And I think Devontae Adams' emergence, in particular with Hundley at quarterback, really makes me think that Rodgers is going to lean on him more as a primary weapon. And to me, that shakes out with Rodgers being a very strong play. But I get it from a game theory perspective. I think you're not wrong.
Yeah, I just see a couple other guys that are going like 30 picks after him that I would consider to be like comparable upside plays. I'd rather just grab a couple more running back, wide receiver type weapons if we're talking season long. Obviously, Rodgers is going to look great in multiple weeks from a daily fantasy perspective.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. And I think too, the one thing I would point with Rodgers is that there's a lot of people flocking to the sort of less proven commodities. I think this year, and will and every sort of league with Watson and Wentz both coming off of injuries. And and I think for me, even Jared Goff, some risk of regression there. I think there is some sort of safety in the guy who, has been there, has done that, also has some contract stuff coming up that could be very interesting, in which he's trying to get a contract which is tied to the salary cap. So he would get a percentage of whatever the cap is. So he would always be the highest paid quarterback in theory. I think there's sort of a lot of good signs for that in terms of his success. But I can see what you're saying. I think there are guys who can be competitive, and you're not paying a steep price.
Going to be 35 this year, just FYI.
Yep. It's getting old. That is an age where guys can drop off. Even though we have seen guys be more successful older, like Breeze and Brady, some do fall off. There is some risk. Houston Texans bringing back Deshaun Watson, plus 1,500 to win MVP this year. Expected backups are Brandon Weeden and Joe Webb. There's a thing which I have in the article, which you can see. Deshaun Watson doing some nice cutting already on the field, running some agility drills, which he put on his Instagram, and then it went viral from there, including the Texans themselves gladly putting it out there to show him off. The MVP odds, brief Instagram videos, all those things combined make me think that Watson looks good. He needs to get a little more accurate. He was only 61.8% completion rate last year, which would put him between Jay Cutler and Eli Manning, which, would like to see more there. His rushing ability, obviously going to be a little bit of a question mark coming off of a catastrophic knee injury like he had. And he did average about 40 yards per game on the ground last year, which those 4 points in fantasy, or depending on your league scoring, could be very useful. I still buy more into Watson than against him. And I would hope that his time on the sidelines kind of brought his brain up to speed even more, where he'll be a little more cerebral quarterback than he should be as a second-year starter. I like Watson. I think there's some injury risk, but I do like Watson a lot.
Yeah, I like him too. He was really good last year. I'm just worried about his health. That's really my only sort of hesitation with him. I would pump the brakes a little bit. I figured next year is probably the year that this looks a little bit better. I mean, it's coming back from a really big time injury, and at quarterback, there's no margin for error. So I would expect him to step back from the performances that we've seen from last year in 7 games. So I'm buying Watson's future. I don't necessarily know that I'm buying his 2018.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's some risk to his 2018. I'm comfortable enough with him, but it sort of depends on when you're getting him, where you're getting him,
He's the number 2 quarterback off the board right now. That's too high.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one.
I don't see any upside in making that pick.
Yeah, all right, I'm with it. I agree. And any sort of loss on the rushing yards or TDs too would be a ding to his stuff. It's all relative, again, where he falls, where the next few weeks lead us, and before drafts hit and all that stuff. But yeah, I think from that perspective, I think you're right. Indianapolis Colts. Andrew Luck officially cleared today to start throwing with no limitations. So that is good news. I'm actually not sure that it affected his odds for MVP since I wrote this yesterday or 2 days ago. But he was at least then plus 3,000 to win MVP. His expected backup again will be Jacoby Brissett, who was vaguely competent in limited time last year. The Colts added Eric Ebron and Ryan Grant to the offense. The biggest addition, though, new head coach Frank Reich, a guy who was heavily credited for Carson Wentz's growth and Nick Foles' competence as he filled in last year. The Eagles ran and passed the ball effectively under Reich's stewardship last year, while Indianapolis was actually the 9th best in yards per pass attempt in 2016 with Andrew Luck behind center. One thing that is very worrisome, last year they were terrible at allowing sacks to the quarterback. They allowed their quarterbacks to get hit on 10.3% of dropbacks last year. It's not great given Andrew Luck's injury history. But to me, if Luck is healthy and they have a really compelling new offensive-minded coach, I'm okay with him, and I think you're probably going to be able to get him cheaper than some of these other injured guys, even though he has a much better track record.
Luck is going right around the same spot that Stafford is going, which is in the 10th or 11th quarterback off the board.
I'd much rather Luck, I think.
I can't imagine. I don't see Luck's ceiling being that much higher than Stafford before like factoring in the fact that he appears to be made out of spaghetti. Riggs doesn't like Andrew Luck much either.
That was a really strong rebuff of Andrew Luck by Riggs.
Yeah, Riggs is not a big Andrew Luck guy this year. Much more into Fat Matt. So, yeah, like he just has to be on the field. That's all that this is, right? We're not expecting Andrew Luck to play 16 games and be bad. So, if he plays, I expect what he does to be good. But can you expect him to play? I say probably not.
The sack thing worries me a little bit. I don't want him getting hit that much. If he's getting hit 10% of the time, that's not great. That's not making me feel good.
I don't know. Riggs is looking at me now. We might be misinterpreting the groans. I think he might be more Andrew like Luck more and not huge on Stafford. What do you say, buddy? I can't tell what you're thinking, man. I don't know. I'll get in touch with Riggs a little bit later. Maybe we'll do a me and Riggs podcast to break this down.
That's fair. I think overall we're torn on Andrew Luck. He's interesting. I find him a little more interesting than I think Josh does. Maybe more in line with Riggs. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Jacksonville Jaguars expected starter is Blake Bortles, who is plus 9,000 to win MVP. Expected backup is going to be Cody Kessler, a proud USC man who makes me go woof. So that's not the best. Bortles gets a lot of flack in general online and on the Twitterverse, but he did drive the Jags to a 13th ranked passing 5.4 passing yards per play, which is up from 27th ranked in 2016. They lost Allen Robinson, Allen Hearns, and Mercedes Lewis, but they brought back Marquise Lee, also kept Dede Westbrook, and they bring on board Austin Seferian-Jenkins, a guy who Josh has extolled the value of a little more in previous weeks. They're also adding a top guard, Andrew Norwell, on the richest guard deal ever. Something that's only going to help Bortles in terms of protection. Bortles actually, he's not a great downfield quarterback, but he did limit his interceptions pretty well last year. Only finished 11th in the league in terms of interception rate, so that's pretty good. And he avoided sacks at a 5th best rate in the league. He's maybe a low upside play. I think a lot of people are risky about him. I don't know that I would love him in a season-long fantasy league, but can Blake Bortles beat up on some shitty teams and maybe win you some DFS tournaments? Maybe. It's not crazy to me.
Yeah, he's a much better DFS guy than he's going to be season-long. No one's touching him in season-long, nor should they. That's not sort of his game. He was decent, above average in adjusted net yards per attempt last year. I don't want to say that I'm a Bortles fan because that would be a really dumb statement. But, I think he's fine. I like the Jags as a team, but I'm not really buying Bortles in any sort of fantasy aspect unless it's, week-by-week DFS stuff. He's just not a guy that's that exciting. He'll be like the guy that's 1.5% owned one week that wins you a milli maker, but that's it.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously the offense's goal is to mostly limit his mistakes, so that's gonna reflect when he's not turning it over. So I think I'm with you on it. I think he can help in DFS, but for season long, he's not going to suddenly become a different player, especially when they just don't need him to do that. They need him to not screw up mostly. Kansas City Chiefs expected starter Pat Mahomes plus 3,300 to win MVP. Expected backup Chad Henne. One quote which I thought was interesting, which just came from Peter King this past week. Chiefs coach Andy Reid saying about Pat Mahomes, Pat owes Alex Smith a lot for what he taught him. Pat owes Alex a mansion. So he thinks that Pat Mahomes has somehow siphoned all the brain power of Alex Smith and going to not miss a beat as he takes over the starting role. The Vegas odds for Pat Mahomes have risen quite a bit with him. A lot of good juju around him, I guess, press-wise. They also add Sammy Watkins, another game-breaking receiver if he can stay healthy. The team last year was second in the league in yards after the catch, fourth in the league in yards per pass attempt. Again, you're adding Sammy Watkins to that and a very explosive offense. It's hard to imagine Mahomes, whose reputation is more in line with Brett Favre, somehow limiting his interceptions at the rate that Alex Smith did. Smith only threw a pick on 1.2% of his dropbacks, so that would be a top 3 performance by him. Smith was also very accurate, just limited risk, much better than Mahomes will. They are trading risk for upside, though, and the hope is that Mahomes is going to make the offense even more vertical, even more aggressive than it has been. Mahomes is going to get a lot of heat over these next few weeks and become very popular to the point where I might swing back the other way. But for right now, I like Mahomes a lot, and I think there's a lot of upside to be had there.
Mahomes' average draft position is essentially the same as Roethlisberger, Jared Goff, and Matt Ryan. Of those four guys, he's obviously the highest variance option here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see him having anywhere near the season that Alex Smith had last year. Smith was just absolutely exceptional. But he should be more viable from a fantasy perspective. Look, he's going to put up a clunker. There's going to be some 3-interception game where things go really poorly for him. But he's got a ton of weapons. So he's like a really nice DFS GPP option.
Okay, so we're about halfway through right now. Do you want to plug through a few more and then do a part two, I guess maybe tomorrow morning? I got to get this out this week.
Chargers would be 16, right?
I believe so. Or I think actually the Chiefs might have been 16. I'm not sure. Might have just miscounted.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Chiefs are 16. Let's wrap it up because we're at 50 minutes right now. Part 2 coming soon.
Part 2, hopefully within the next few days. Well, I guess they won't know anyway because this won't be on the YouTube channel. But yeah, we'll clip this right now. Part 2 coming in a time frame in which you won't even realize that's part 2. So we'll do this shortly. But yeah, see you guys soon.
Thanks for hanging with us. Bye.